Hey, it's me, Robert. Have you ever heard of the Dark Triad? It's a big collection of personalities. I mean, it's not that big, actually. It's three. It's three personality disorders. Sometimes it's actually traits and not disorders, but whatever. Talking about disorders this time. It's a big three though. It's a very noticeable three. People who have these things tend to be pretty bad people. Apathetic, violent, crude, cruel, more than capable of ruining someone's life, harmful to whatever company is unlucky enough to hire them. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So, what even is it? How does it work? Well, I'm no psychologist, um, but I did look things up on Google.com and looked at web sites. So I'll try. The dark triad is a personality theory describing three malevolent but non pathological disorders. You can tell what I pull from Wikipedia because I use words longer than three syllables. As for the three personalities, it's narcissism characterized, that's a Wikipedia word, by egotisticalness, grandiosity, lack of empathy, stuff like that. There's also psychopathy, characterized by ahem, continuous and antisocial behavior, impulsivity, lack of self control, selfishness, and callous and unemotional. What is callous? What is that word? Showing or having an intensive and cruel disregard for others. That's what it means. It's also a variant spelling of callous. It's also a thickened and hardened part of the skin or soft tissue, especially in an area that has been subjected to friction. I love the English language. Anyways, there's also oh my god, I forgot about this word. Machiavelli Machiavellianism. Machia Machiavel Machiavel Machiavellianism. I'm gonna say that. I don't think that's right. So Mac whatever that thing. It's characterized by continuative, manipulative behavior, indifference to morality, a lack of empathy, and a calculated focus on self-interest. And that's a brief overview on everything. I wish I could be done here, but it's only been 4 minutes, and there's another 4 pages for me to read off. I haven't even read off one page yet. I read like less than a quarter of a page. I'm cooked. Anyway, anyways, I'll be giving a brief background on each of their histories, a more in-depth view and description of them, and okay, I I'll try my best. Starting off, the one you know best has at least two movies made in its name. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Psychopathy. Oh, the famous one. Okay, so um everything you know is wrong. Everything, like everything. You ever seen this? This is a hair psychopathy checklist. It's a handy little thing used as a criteria for psychopathy diagnosis, and so I'll just I'll just read these off, to be specific. Where did I put that? There it is. Gymnast slash superficial charm, egocentricity slash grandiose sense of self worth, proneness to boredom slash low frustration tolerance, pathological lying and deception, conning slash lack of sincerity, lack of remorse or guilt, lack of affection and emotional depth, callousness, that word again, lack of empathy, parasitic lifestyle, short tempered slash poor behavior controls, history of promiscuous sexual relations, history of early behavioral problems, lack of realistic long-term goals, impulsivity, irresponsible behavior, frequent marital relationships, and a history of juvenile delinquency. Okay. Is that what you expected? Maybe? I don't know. I don't know what's going on in your head. I wish I could read minds. That would be awesome. So, I wouldn't blame you if it wasn't exactly. You probably expected something about violence, lots of violence, incredible amounts of violence. That's not really a thing. You've might have seen American Psycho or literally that black and white movie named Psycho. I think that was its name. Uh, so people do probably think it's about murder and shit, but I personally think the most detrimental thing in terms of the stigma associated with psychopathy is definitely Silence of the Lambs, specifically the movie, because the movie says he's a psychopath. You know what I mean by Hannibal. You know, the guy with that super, what was it, super smell, I think? Super duper smell. He can smell you through walls. I don't think psychopaths can do that. Anyways, the history of psychopathy, whatever you want to call it. The word psychopath itself is a combination of two Greek words, psyche and pathos. The first time it was used to describe someone was in Germany with the word I cannot pronounce this psychopathish psychopathish. Do I do that ish thing? Do I psychopathish? Did I do it? I don't know. First documented use of the English word psychopath has been traced back to 1855. Could it be farther back? Maybe, I don't know. The term psychopathic came to be used to describe a diverse range of dysfunctional and antisocial behavior and mental and sexual deviances, including at the time homosexuality. It was often used to imply an underlying constitutional or genetic origin. Disparate or Disparate early descriptions likely set the stage for modern controversies about the definition of psychopathy. I'll do it again. Dis- disparate, hmm, disparate early descriptions likely set the stage for modern controversies about the definition of psychopathy. The term psychopathy was popularized in 1891 in Germany by Koch's, this guy, concept of psychopathic inferiority, which is pronounced. I'll just pull up Google Translate, I think. Oh my god. Psychopathisch Minderwertigkeiten. Psychopathisch Minderwertigkeiten. Pathic Minderwertigkeiten. How am I meant to do this, Google Translate? I'm American. I can't do this. I know one language. Um, okay, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Uh, where was I? Oh yeah. Uh, so the concept of psychopathic inferiority was used to describe various behavioral and moral dysfunction in the absence of an obvious mental illness or intellectual disability. He applied the term psychopathic inferiority to various chronic conditions and character disorders, and his work would influence a later conception of personality disorder. Some medical dictionaries still define psychopathy in both a narrow and broad sense, such as Medline Plus from the U.S. National Library of Medicine. On the other hand, Stedman's medical dictionary defines psychopath only as a former designation for a person with an antisocial type of personality disorder. The media, you can tell it's serious because my voice cracked. The media usually uses the term psychopath to designate any criminal whose offenses are particularly abhorrent and unnatural. but that is not its original or generic psychiatric meaning. That's what I meant by stigma. There is a serious stigma about psychopaths, and and I mean serious. If you asked a small child what they think a psychopath is, they would either not know or say a killer. I, they don't. That's what I mean. Like, and they're gonna grow up thinking that. You want an example? You might not think that that's possible, but I can give you a personal example of something like that that happened to me once. So you know that one Percy Jackson movie, The Lightning Thief. Whenever I was a small child, I watched that, and for the rest, for the next like 13 years of my life, I thought that dyslexia literally made the letters move around. I had to learn on my own what it actually is. That I genuinely thought that until a few good months ago, because I just didn't know. Because that's what I learned. That's the stigma I had learned from this. Anyways, there are multiple conceptualizations of psychopathy, including Klecklian. Shekelian psychopathy is Hervey Cleckley's conception entailing bold, disinhibited behavior and affectless regard. And criminal psychopathy is a meaner, more aggressive, and disinhibited conception, explicitly entailing persistent and sometimes serious criminal behavior. The latter conceptualization is typically used as a modern clinical concept and assessed by the psychopathy checklist. The label psychopath may have implications and stigma related to decisions about the punishment severity for criminal acts, medical treatment, civil commitments, etc. Efforts have therefore been made to clarify the meaning of the term, but not everyone who's emotionally deficient or something are psychopaths either. Uh, People who are violent aren't naturally psychopaths. There's a big stigma. And on a completely unrelated note, listen what Mr. Hare himself from Hare's Psychopathy Checklist has to say about psychopaths. Ahem. Psychopaths are social predators who charm, manipulate, and ruthlessly plow their way through life, leaving a trail of broken hearts, shattered expectations, and empty wallets. Completely lacking in consciousness and feeling for others, they selfishly take what they want and do as they please, violating social norms and expectations without the slightest sense of guilt or regret. Robert D. Hare, 1993. So yeah, there might be there might be a bit of a stigma. Like all personality disorders or personality traits or whatever you want to say, it's a spectrum. I want to get up. I want to get down. I want to feel so good, so bad. I don't want to get round. I need to get up. I need to be free. So, as defined as you can get with psychopathy, it has been conceptualized as a hybrid condition marked by a paradoxical combination of superficial charm, emotional resilience, and venturesomeness on the outside, but a deep-seated affective disturbances and impulse control deficits on the inside. From this perspective, psychopathy is at least in part characterized by psychologically adaptive traits. Furthermore, according to this view, psychopathy may be linked to some interpersonally successful outcomes, such as effective leadership, business accomplishments, and heroism. Anyways, narcissism. Narcissism is the second trait on the dark triad, and it, its history goes much much farther back than psychopathy. Psychopathy went like 150 years, somewhat. This goes back to 8 CE. The term narcissism is derived from Narcissus, a character in Greek mythology best known from the telling in Roman poets Ovid's Metamorphosis. Yes, with an E. So it would probably be C's. Metamorphoses. Written in 8 CE, Book 3 of the poem tells the mythical story of a handsome young man, Narcissus, who spurns the advances of many potential lovers. And when Narcissus rejects the nymph Echo, who is cursed to only echo the sounds that others make, the gods punish Narcissus by making him fall in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. When Narcissus discovers that the object of his love cannot love him back, he slowly pines away and dies. Back in the time that Metamorphoses was written, though, there wasn't narcissism, at least not as a term. Instead, it was called hubris. Though there was much more the idea of extreme selfishness and what narcissism is. That is the first of many different terms. It's different. Very different. Not wrong, because it wasn't wrong back then. That's the only definition they had back then. So I can't really say it's wrong. But it isn't what we have today. Even as it came into use all the way back in the 19th century, it meant a significantly different thing than what it means now. It was used to describe a sexual perversion or a normal developmental stage or a symptom of psychosis or a characteristic in several of the object relations. I don't really know what that is, but I looked it up, and it's a theory describing the relationship felt or the emotional energy directed by the self or ego towards a chosen object. I am not a psychologist. I don't know how to explain that. Those are buzzwords to me. That I don't know what. However, in 1889, psych, however, in 1889, psychiatrics Paul. Oh my God, that's. I'm. I should know this. How do you pronounce this letter? E. Narcissism in this context was seen as a perversion that consumed a person's entire sexual life. In 1911, Otto Rank published the first clinical paper about narcissism, linking it to vanity and self admiration, which is an improvement. Getting closer, right? In 1925, wait, what are these names? In 1925, Robert Wilder conceptualized narcissism as a personality trait. His definition described individuals who are condescending, feel superior to the others, and are preoccupied with admiration, and exhibit a lack of empathy. His patient was a successful scientist with an attitude of superiority, an obsession with fostering self respect, and a lack of normal feelings of guilt. The patient was aloof and independent from others and had an inability to emphasize, and was selfish sexually. Wilder's patient was also overly logical and analytical, and valued abstract intellectual thought over the practical application of scientific knowledge. And in 1939, Karen Horney postulated that narcissism was on a spectrum that ranged from healthy self esteem to a pathological state. And it is! Again, all of these are, every single one of these traits. It's a spectrum with dozens of varying levels and types of it capable of appearing. It's very wild, all over the place. Two primary expressions of narcissism have been identified. There's grandiose narcissism, which is thick skinned, and vulnerable narcissism, which is thin skinned. I want to say thick again. I saved it though. Recent accounts posit that the core of narcissism is self centered antagonism, or entitled self importance, namely selfishness, entitlement, lack of empathy, and evaluation of others. Grandiosity and vulnerability are seen as different expressions of this antagonistic core, arising from individual differences in the strength of the approach and avoidance. Grandiosity and vulnerability are seen as different expressions of this antagonistic core, arising from an individual, differences in the strength of the approach and avoidance motivational systems. Grandiosity is very antagonistic and self-serving, while vulnerable is, well, I mean, it's in the name. You've seen people act like they own the world and then get insecure and fold when they get mildly insulted. That's what vulnerable is like. That those people might not be narcissists. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Grandiosity has more severe traits than vulnerability, but not to the narcissists themselves. They are very happy with themselves. They have a very incredibly high self esteem. The issue is how they treat everyone else. It's debilitating to the people surrounding them. They have pure beliefs of superiority and fantasies of power that they want to enact on everyone around them. So, people don't like you. But at least you're happy. Yay. Vulnerability is probably going to show up in people who are treated like trash as a child. To be blunt, it's a need for attention, really. A need to feel better than others. Not because they think that they are, but because they want to think that they are. Low self esteem, but pretty much pretending to have high self esteem. There are more types, though, but grandiose and vulnerable are the main ones. There's parental, sexual, workplace, celebrity, probably more. Though I think they're self explanatory. I mean, parental is parents using their children to feel better about themselves. Workplace is bosses using their workers to feel better about themselves. It's a trend. You can see what it is. Oh, and I nearly forgot to mention, but narcissism isn't always bad. Normally, when you hear someone say everybody's a little bit blank, they're being annoying and harmful to whatever they're referring to. But this, for once, this actually applies to something. It applies to narcissism. Everyone is. Everyone's narcissistic in a way, even if only slightly. Any positive emotion you feel towards your own being is, in some way, narcissism. Which means that having small amounts of narcissism is good for your self health and image. It's not bad to think that you're good at something, or to be happy with something you've done, or to accept praise. That being happy isn't sort of harmful narcissism. What's harmfully narcissistic is a devout belief that you are or need to be better than others. That's harmful. Anyways, on to the last one, which is a long word. It's a long word, Machiavellianism. In the field of personality psychology, Machiavellianism, sometimes abbreviated as MAC, with an H, is it match or Mac? Who knows? Is a name and personality trait construct characterized by manipulativeness, indifference of morality, lack of empathy, and a calculated focus on self-interest. Like everything here, along with pretty much every other personality trait ever, as I've said before and I'll say again, Machiavellianism is a spectrum. Depending on how high or how low you are on said spectrum, you can be a very deceitful, apathetic, crude person willing to turn anybody over to get what you want, or someone who doesn't do that. Yeah. In 1955, psychologist Richard Christie held to study the thought processes and actions behind those who manipulated others, such as political ideologues and religious extremists. Those guys. He found that there was much literature on who followed organizations' movements, but very little on those who led them. He began by conceptualizing what qualities a potential manipulator would have, such as a lack of empathy and affect, and being unconcerned with moral standards. Then, as Christie was developing a psychometric for interpersonal manipulation, he thought it necessary to utilize the style of various authors he was researching to better suit the needs of the construction of the test. In the 1960s, Christie and his colleagues would then develop a test using a selection of their own statements, which they viewed were discriminatory enough to measure personality differences, naming the construct Machiavellianism. They wanted to assess whether or not those who were in agreement with the statements would behave differently than those who disagreed, specifically in regards to manipulative actions. Christie and his research partner Florence L. Gaze published their results in their book titled Studies in Machiavellianism in 1970. Several behavioral genetic studies have shown that Machiavellianism has both significantly genetic and environmental influences. Researchers have noted that while Machiavellianism is inheritable to a substantial degree, it can also be influenced by a shared environment, slightly more than narcissism and psychopathy. Other traits associated with Machiavellianism are influenced by genetics as well. As one study notes that the co-occurrence of alexithymia and Machiavellianism was most heavily influenced by genetic factors, and to a lesser but significant extent by non-shared environmental factors. Machiavellianism was also heavily correlated with primary psychopathy, which itself is strongly inheritable. A study on the core of the dark triad also empathized that. Oh, you kidding me? I had to yawn. On the core of dark triad traits also empathized that the residual traits of Machiavellianism had significant genetic components. And the relationship between Machiavellianism and mental toughness is also moderated by environmental factors and a genetic basis. One particular study for a gene responsible for dopamine reception was possibly associated with individuals who scored high on the MAC4, but it's unclear what specific mechanisms cause this effect. Oh, in the MAC4, I don't know if I said this yet, but that's the test that they set up, those guys earlier who published that book. Probably should have said that, but it's fine. Studies have shown a link between Machiavellianism and a blunted cortisol awakening response, which is some sort of drug in your brain, I think. Maybe. As you wake up, you get more of it. So having a blunted thing with that means you get less of it. Sorry, I had to yawn. And a person's cortisol awakening response has been associated with a lack of effective empathy and is highly heritable. The environmental causes, such as shared and non-shared environment, that contributed to development of Machiavellianism were childhood maltreatment and neglect, social reinforcement, manipulative behaviors from an early age, and poor family functioning. One study even stated that the etiology of Machiavellianism, similarly in development, a dispensing avoidant pattern, partially originates from childhood experiences obtained in the relationship with unexpressive, less understanding, highly punitive, or restrictive caregivers. In many studies, Machiavellianism has been heavily correlated with a negative home atmosphere, as well as loneliness and adverse parental experiences. One study, I like how it says one study and nothing else, noted that the punishment specifically led to the emergence of deceitful and exploitive interpersonal tactics. Sorry, I had to burp. The authors of this study concluded that the results might give further support for the idea that Machiavellianism personality traits are possible strategic responses to childhood adversaries. Another study found that the traits of Machiavellianism to be a response for early maladaptive schemas, essentially coping mechanisms for emotional deprivation, mistrust, abuse, and caregiver rejection, irregular parent care, such as a mother being neglectful and a father being overprotected, blah 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 blah. The hereditary influence of Machiavellianism may make it challenging to disentangle the genetic underpinnings from the effects of parental upbringing, environmental factors. And another study also echoed similarly that it is difficult to separate genetic contributions from parenting environments, and negative fathers might be high on Machiavellian traits, and therefore the transmission might be genetic rather than environmental. I like giving the researchers funny little voices. Many psychologists consider Machiavellianism to be essentially indistinguishable. Many psychologists consider Machiavellianism to be essentially indistinguishable. Many psychologists consider Machiavellianism to be essentially indistinguishable from psychopathy, as they both share manipulative tendencies, describe for morality, and cold callousness as their primary attributes. There is an immense and ongoing debate amongst researchers as to whether or not Machiavellianism and psychopathy should be treated as the same construct, or at least treat Machiavellianism as a subset of psychopathy. That was a video of a man banging pots together. Was it interesting? Many psychologists consider Machiavellianism to be essentially indistinguishable from psychopathy, as they both share manipulative tendencies. My screen just turned off. What the Why? Why are you like this? Many psychologists. Many psychologists consider Machiavellianism to be essentially indistinguishable from psychopathy, as they both share manipulative tendencies, disregard for morality, and cold callousness as their primary attributes. There is an immense and ongoing debate amongst researchers as to whether or not Machiavellianism and psychology There is an immense and ongoing debate amongst researchers as to whether or not Machiavellianism and psychopathy should be treated as the same construct, or at least Machiavellianism as a subset of psychopathy. When tested, high max did score consistently high on measures of psychopathy, more than low max. And primary psychopaths also scored higher on the Machiavellianism scale than secondary psychopaths, but that's obvious. I mean, they have the same traits. According to John McCoskey, this guy, the MAC4 test is merely a global measure of psychopathy in non-institutionalized populations, and that this is a result of the disconnect between clinical and personal psychology. Many have stated the Machiavellianism scale measures nothing more than successful psychopathy, or psychopathy without extreme clinical characteristics, and even compared to other dark traits, the research has shown that psychopathy correlates with Machiavellianism far more than it does with narcissism. Some authors have stated that Machiavellianism and psychopathy represent the issue of a jangle fallacy, as both constructs are named differently yet describe the same concept. A recent paper published in 2022 stated that Machiavellianism is theoretically... Okay. A recent paper published in 2022 stated that Machiavellianism is theoretically distinct from psychopathy, but empirically they are nearly indistinguishable. Beverly Fair even suggested that psychopaths may be simply high max, fed up against the law. Robert Hare, that guy, author of Psychopathy Checklist, stated that Machiavellianism is more closely related to PLC Factor 1, affective detachment, than Factor 2, an antisocial lifestyle. Machiavellianism and psychopathy overlap so much that researchers have proposed merging the two traits into each other, preferably incorporating Machiavellianism into psychopathy. There have been attempts to combine Machiavellianism and psychopathy into one construct, such as the creation of a dark dyad instead of a dark triad with the exclusion of narcissism. There's also been a suggestion for a dark quadrad, including sadism. So that's the dark triad. All three traits. Hope you learned something. Hope if you didn't, womp womp. I want to be done. Bye.